Hi, it's Emma from Arise, and I thought I would do a little short podcast just to give a snapshot of the books that we are currently reading. Well, some of the books that we're reading. So, I have got books that my kids are doing for school, but I've also got my own books that I'm reading just now for my own pleasure. Um, the books I'm showing you are the books, yeah, they're more the school books, but we're also reading lots of just picture books and stuff, and those vary from day to day because my second youngest is only 4, and I've also got my 6-year-old who will also bring just random books to read. So I might do another video looking at just a selection of the kind of picture books that they are really enjoying just now, because they kind of go through phases where we'll read the same one over and over again, especially with my 4-year-old. So these are ones, and they're in no particular order, they're literally in the order I gathered them around. So the first book I'm going to look at is Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. My 12-year-old is doing this. We're also doing it in co-op, and we're doing it for school. Okay, so Number the Stars is about a Danish family and their Jewish neighbours, and who are also their close friends, and it looks at the Holocaust. No, it doesn't specifically actually deal with the Holocaust. It looks at the Nazi occupation of Denmark and its implication for the Jews, and how a lot of the Jews in Denmark, they fled to Sweden, which was not occupied, and how they escaped. We've read this. I read this with my older children a few years ago, and so it's kind of come back around again. It's a fantastic book of historical fiction. When I first read it, it was an area of Second World War history I just didn't know anything about. So this is it's a really good book, not only for teaching the history, but also the wider ideas within it are really good for discussion. So that's one that we've been doing both individually but in our co-op. Aesop's Fables, we do a couple of these a week with my 6-year-old, and I just read them and she narrates them back, and I write down what she says in her little jotter for narration, and then she can draw a little picture that goes with these. And some of them she enjoys, some of them are written, but generally this is one she enjoys. Another one I'm doing with my 6-year-old is 50 Famous Stories Retold. These are like famous kind of books that are just really embedded in our culture. Like we did William Tell, we did King Alfred, Andronicus and the Lion was one, the story of Cincinnatus, Robert the Bruce and the Spider. So this again, we do these one story a week. She narrates it back, and she's really enjoying these. And sometimes my 12-year-old will sit in and listen to them as well, because they're just great stories, and they're not very long either. This is a new book to us this year. Let's Explore the British Isles, a geography reader. And I have really found this a great resource. It's just a little read around. It's got nice little map drawings. I'm doing this with my 12-year-old. And I try to have my 6-year-old just listening, although it's a bit advanced for her. And we tie it in with map work, and he then does some narration work alongside this. Dirty Glory by Pete Gregg. This came out of the 24/7 prayer movement, and it's just full of testimonies of God moving. And I wanted to do something with my boys, which for in our morning read aloud time, where we were exploring, looking at how God's moving. So often I think we're really good at doing books of great missionaries or Christians from the past. I wanted to bring something that was full of testimonies of God moving, and more today. This is last 10 to 20 years with people who are still alive, and just to show how God is moving in all these different places across the world, and about the power of prayer. So it's just packed full of testimonies of the goodness of God and the power of God, and how God is saving and redeeming lives across the earth. So that's on our morning pile. Beowulf is a class as well. It's one of these seminal pieces of English literature. It is the first book of English literature to be written down. It is dealing with that kind of crossover from pagan Britain to Christian Britain. It doesn't, no, it's not dealing with it. It's you see that transition between pagan Britain to Christian Britain. Its roots are in pagan Anglo-Saxon lore. And we're doing this at co-op, and I did it with my daughter a few years ago, and I think it's great. Anyone that loves Tolkien, um, this kind of book is a really good book to dip into, because Tolkien kind of, this was the stuff he studied. Tolkien actually has a version of it. He did a translation of the original Beowulf from the Old English. So that's one. There's a few different translations. So Tolkien has one. Seamus Heaney has another one that's very famous. I picked this one by Michael Swanston because it's easier to understand. So Swanston kind of does his translation. He doesn't preserve the poetry as much as say Tolkien or Heaney does, but he sacrificed that for more understanding of the narrative. But it's still a very good, rigorous translation, and it's full of really good notes at the end to help us understand it. The other thing I quite like about it is, so this side here is the English, well, modern English, and this is the Old English, and so you can see compare them and just see how English has evolved over the centuries. Pride and Prejudice is the book it's the book we're studying in Arise British Lit just now. My two oldest sons are doing this in the Arise class, so we've been studying this and reading this. I have managed to convert one son into a girl book, Jane Austen, to actually he thinks it's actually really quite good. So I think I've done a result there. So Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, absolutely love it, and it's been an absolute joy to be doing this with my own two boys. Every morning we do poetry. So what I do with poetry is I'll pick a poet and we'll read a poem a day for a term. And we've been doing this for years. And this will kind of start at the end of last term. Continuing into this term is W.B. Yeats. His poetry just is the kind of poetry I personally really love. It's lyrical, it's beautiful. So we're doing one a day. And the boys they're not hating it. And I think picking one poet a day really immerses them in the style of that poet, and we'll discuss what the poet's saying, and we've been doing this for years. And at my 15-year-old, he'll say he actually likes poetry, which I think is a direct result of how we've been doing this for years and years. I do poetry with the girls, we do poetry tea time, and that's just a selection more children's kind of level poetry. Still good quality. I've got a few different poetry books that they just pull out and they choose what we want to read over a cup of tea cake. But that was the one I do every day with the boys. And we're also reading King Arthur, Tales from the Round Table, and this is by Andrew Lang, and it is just a retelling of the Arthurian legends. I bought this because my 12-year-old is doing IEW medieval history book this year, and that was one on the reading list for that. And we're using it as a read aloud, so that we can read it together. And he is absolutely loving this. Has kind of opened up for him this he's going down rabbit holes looking at the different Arthurian legends. He also likes Tolkien, so it kind of ties in nicely with that. And so he's set off on a little trajectory of studying from reading this. And he comes to me and asks for it. He'll say, "Can we do the Arthur book now?" Now, I think a lot of people stop reading aloud to their kids when they're quite proficient in reading, but I try and keep reading aloud to my kids for as long as possible, because it allows them to access books that might be just a bit above the reading level, but I also think it creates a lovely family atmosphere. It builds connection between me and my children. And I really believe that when they grow up, this will be something that they carry into adulthood, that they'll remember the books. And even as teenage boys now, they'll talk about the books we did when they were younger, and the ones that they remembered really fondly, and the ones that they loved. And they'll always come when we're talking about what books they're going to read next. They'll often revert back to books that they loved a few years ago, and ask for books that are similar, or if the same writer has magically managed to make another one, even though they've kind of read them all. So we kind of do that. We keep that reading aloud. I do it every morning. We have a morning time where I read. And I do morning time with the boys differently from the girls because the age gap is quite big. So that's what I'm kind of doing with. That's mostly what we're doing it with school books. There are a few, as I said, picture books that we bring in, but obviously those are not ongoing. For me, I like to have, I've only got two in my pile right now. I usually have three, maybe four, but I've got two just now, and I just finished a few weeks ago Lee Bowden's Modern Miss Mason, which I would recommend any home educator read. It's one of the best books on home education I've read in years, and I may actually just go back and reread it. So the first book that I've got is The Nature of Winter, and I really quite like reading seasonally. So I love, one of my favorite genres of writing is nature journals, nature books, and I love reading them in seasons. So Jim Crumley has got a series of journals from all the different seasons. So I read the autumn one, and now I'm on to winter. I'm nearly finished the winter one, and I'm going to have to pick up spring. I've already got summer. I picked autumn, winter, and summer up in a charity shop in Pitlochry a few years ago. And they've just been sitting looking rather pretty on my bookshelf for a few years, and I just randomly picked one up in autumn, the autumn one up, and I kind of got hooked. And so now I'm going to just keep going until I finish the full series, and I'm really enjoying it. He writes in um he's a Scottish nature writer. He lives near Stirling, and so the areas he's writing about are places I'm really familiar with and places that I personally have a connection and a love for. So it makes the reading of this more enjoyable for me because he's also a very good writer, which helps. I'm also reading This Beautiful Truth by Sarah Clarkson. It documents her battle with mental health and looking for the goodness of God in the midst of the darkness of that. And I read it a couple of years ago. I read it when it first came out because I'd read some of Sarah Clarkson's work before, and she is the most beautiful writer. And so I read it then, and it really touched me. She deals with the theology of beauty and the goodness of God, and grapples with the goodness of God and the suffering and the brokenness of the world that we're living in, and how, and the tension between these, and seeking answers for her own mental health struggles that were really crippled her through her 20s, and how to, the tension that exists between our good, loving Father and the brokenness and wickedness in the world, and the consequences of that in people's lives, not just as like this kind of high theological idea, that the real nitty gritty of how our broken fallen world affects people, and our children and our communities, and coming to terms with that. It's deep, it's thought provoking, it's beautifully written, and again, I'm coming to the end of that one, and it's fed my soul and my mind, and I've really enjoyed having a second read of it. It's been really good. So that is our reading pile for the beginning of January 2024. I've actually also started this year doing a reading log. So all the books I'm reading, I'm trying to log them because every end of every year I kind of try mentally go over what I've read and I can't remember them all, or I misremember if I've read it this year or last year. So I thought I'm going to just do a log. So in my Evernotes, I have created just a new note, and I'm just basically noting down when I start a book, and if I want to put wee notes about the book afterwards, I do. But just so I have something to remember what I've read at the end of the year, because I think that would be quite nice. I've seen other people do that, and I thought I would try it this year. So yeah, that's our reading list. And as I say, I will try and do one with just a selection of picture books that we are really enjoying just now as a family.